But we are excited to get started with our opening plenary. EcoCanada's vision is to build the world's leading environmental workforce, and it is time to begin. And to begin, it is my honor to introduce and welcome to the stage the President and CEO of EcoCanada, Kevin Nielsen. Please give him a round of applause.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. That thing feels like it's falling down on me. I can't believe it's been a year since we were here last time. Time really flies by quickly when we're having fun. But if you reflect back on what's happened over the past year, a tremendous amount of change has happened, right? The first thing that comes to mind for me is with artificial intelligence. We know artificial intelligence was not invented over the past year, but how many of us had ChatGPT as our best buddy a year ago? Not very many, and now it's, at least for me personally, it's my best brainstorming friend. I run all my ideas through ChatGPT, get feedback and critique. Apologies to some of my great brainstorming friends in the audience here, but nothing really rivals ChatGPT. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout the conference. Beyond AI, there's a lot of changes happening. Environmental professionals are really expected to keep up with some of that challenge, and we're hoping that this conference today will be contributing to helping people keep up with some of the changes and help us contribute with input to us as we're building a strong environmental workforce. I think if you want to succeed as an environmental professional, it is essential to embrace change, and I think that never before has the old saying been more true, if you snooze, you lose. Over the course of this conference, we hope to stimulate some great discussions, exploring some innovative solutions and challenges faced by our sector. We will engage in meaningful discussions, share insights, and we know that if we're going to succeed in building a competent workforce, we have to work together. It's not just a bunch of different individuals. We have to pull together to make sure that we have an adequate supply of competent people to meet both the current and future need for environmental professionals. You've heard the land acknowledgement, which we stand by, but beyond the words of a typical land acknowledgement, EcoCanada's true commitment to reconciliation really comes through the action that we're trying to do every day. Many of you are familiar with our Building Environmental Aboriginal Human Resources program, which is a training program where we partner with traditional knowledge keepers in communities all across the country to put on essential environmental training to train environmental professionals in communities in every region. We've done training in more than 260 different Indigenous communities in every region across the country. We have more than, close to actually 5,000 now people that have gone through that program, providing environmental services within their communities, but also available for hire for projects in any region across the country. So chances are, if you have project work that requires Indigenous people to be part of it, almost anywhere in the country, you can reach out to us, and we probably have a roster of someone who's been trained with that. In addition, something we're doing more of now is that when we're working alongside the traditional knowledge keepers in the communities, we're trying to bring some of that knowledge out for the benefit of everyone. Those of you that are local here are familiar with the Banff Valley, right? There has not been a major fire in the Banff Valley forever, probably 100 years. The old growth forest, it's drying up, and it doesn't take much more than a little spark. I was speaking with some of the Indigenous people that live in that area, and they're saying that they used to do something called cultural burns that was outlawed, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago, probably closer to 50. That mitigated some of that risks with the fire. This year, fires has been more of a challenge than ever before, because now it made its way all the way to the east and down to New York. We tried our best to keep all the smoke going to New York, but still a lot stayed with us. That's a problem, that's a challenge, and that's one little area of wisdom we can take from the traditional knowledge. The theme for Eco Impact 2024 is retrofitting the workforce and empowering environmental innovation. This program is, as always, built with you in mind. We love when you provide input and feedback to us in terms of what we should focus on for the next year's conference, so please keep that coming. This evening, we're going to have a great award ceremony. We're going to celebrate some of the great accomplishments from our young professionals, mid-career professionals, senior auditors, and organizations. There's going to be an interesting keynote that you don't want to miss, which is with a hypnotist, an entertaining hypnotist by the name of Jason Cyrus. I'm personally going to be hiding because I fear he's going to pick on me, but it should be a safe environment to show up if you want to be entertained while seeing all the great work of our professionals. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to the sponsors. More and more organizations are coming behind us and sponsoring and helping put something like this on. It wouldn't be possible without you. And I also want to acknowledge the federal government, who's been faithfully supporting us for over 30 years. And one of the most faithful supporters are in the rooms today with the Environment and Climate Change Canada. They representatives from the Science Horizons program. Many of you know that because some of you started your career with that program, and some of you as organizations have taken advantage of that program to hire and recruit young people. So say thank you to them when you see them in the room. Also acknowledge Employment and Social Development Canada for tremendous support in helping us put on this event today. To start this event, we have a really impressive panel. We're going to squeeze into these comfortable chairs up here. I always like panels to be diverse in terms of who you bring in, perspectives. We have, I'm going to invite the panelists to kind of walk up here while I talk, if you guys wouldn't mind joining me here. These guys are going to share some of their perspectives on how we can build a strong environmental workforce. Just going to see which order they're sitting in so I can introduce them in the right order. We'll start with, we have Winona Lafreniere on the far right, Director of National Energy Center of Excellence at the Indian Resource Council. We have Leslie King, who is the Director of the program at Royal Roads University called the Canadian Centre for Environmental Education. We have Olivier Joyal, who's he's got a long title. It's Executive Vice President, Earth and Environment Strategy and Execution at the largest environmental consulting company in the country, WSP. And then we are happy to also have Amberly Dooley, who's the Director of Policy. Oh, you can see her around the corner at the Pathways Alliance. So now I'm going to start with one question that I want all of you to address. After that, I'm probably going to just ask one for each question. Since we have a lot of questions we want to get through and a limited amount of time, and everyone wants to get to networking as well. So starting with you, Amberly, can you elaborate a little bit in your experience, how your organization contributing to building a strong environmental workforce to kind of meet some of the environmental, economic, and social expectations of society?
Sure. So I work with the Pathways Alliance. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're the 6 major oil sands companies in Canada working together to achieve a net zero goal from our operations by 2050. So all that is to say, we're an oil and gas company collaboration, but we're also working on environmental performance and getting to some of the, not only the climate goals, but some of the biodiversity targets, water use targets, et cetera. And so I think one of the big things that we're seeing is sometimes you hear the language around like, oh, we need to move away from oil and gas, or we need to transition into something. And I don't know that it's necessarily that the workforce needs to transition or change, but I think we need to continue to adapt and evolve. And so at the Pathways Alliance, maybe in the old days you had to be a petrochemical engineer or a geologist to get a job at an oil sands company. But nowadays you can pretty much be anything as long as you've got some sort of innovation or unique perspective that you're bringing to the table. We need everyone from your classic petroleum and geologists through to your folks working on AI and innovation and your field environmental folks, as well as those that are coming up with the cool ideas for how we're going to decarbonize the oil sands sector in Canada. And I don't think it's just the oil sands sector. We've got a number of sectors in our country where we can be leaders in innovating and making changes to help improve our environmental performance while still delivering the services and the goods that people need in order to maintain the standard of living that we have here in our country. So I think it's about moving and adapting, and a little less about, necessarily shifting completely away from something to something new.
And I think, just as a small little commentary on it, I think your organization has done a really good job of focusing on the environment by bringing the per barrel emissions quite down from where it started.
22%.
Moving over to you, Olivier, how is WSP contributing to building a strong environmental workforce and enabling us to meet some of both our environmental, economic, and social expectations?
Well, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. As Kevin mentioned, WSP is one of the largest consultant in environment. We're about 6,000. I have some of my colleagues in the room today. Obviously, the projects are more and more challenging and complex. And for those that have been reading the news this morning, obviously for the first time in 2023, we are past the 1.5 degrees. So I think our workforce has 6,000 people, as I mentioned, in Canada only, right? It's coast to coast. We address those more complex projects ever and trying to finding solution to be more resilient. And Leslie and I have this discussion this morning specifically about the snow in the mountains and things like that. And then she mentioned that for the first time she didn't have a pass for Whistler this year because there's no snow. It's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. We need to adjust ourselves and finding more and more solution. And I think the workforce, if we work all together and sharing the knowledge, I think this is one of the key aspects. If we all together sharing the knowledge and sharing the innovation, we're going to achieve our goal to protect the environment more and more and more.
Leslie?
Yeah, I represent the university sector, for better or for worse, and I'm delighted to say that I have some students and colleagues in the audience, and I'm sure they have a lot to say about the university sector, and I don't think I can represent all of it. But there is transformative change happening in universities. And I think we need transformative change. I think the days are long past when we can develop solutions incrementally. And as Olivier said, we need everybody. I think at COP28 in Dubai, we really recognized that because, of course, for the first time, we really had the oil states with us, sort of. But you know, China and Russia were missing. We need everybody. And so to have everybody, we need to be very aware of justice issues. And we need not just transformation, but regeneration. We have a huge crisis on our hands, and we're not going to be able to solve that crisis unless we transform the workforce, transform the institutions, and really have regenerative solutions. And that includes, thanks, Kevin, for talking about reconciliation. We have to make reconciliation a reality so that we can use all the wisdom that we have here in this country and internationally.
Thank you, Leslie. Winona?
So I want to say good morning. Hi. My spiritual birth name is Hainun Woman, and my English name is Winona. I come from Treaty 4 territory, Menegazibi Anishinaabe Nation, which is Pine Creek, 4 hours northwest of Winnipeg. Been a visitor here in Alberta for 22 years. I started my career in the oil and gas in Grand Prairie. Worked in that industry for 15 years, went to work in government, and you know, we come across the same, as Indigenous people in this country, we come across the same challenges. Everywhere I go, it doesn't matter, right? And I think it's no different in mainstream, but one of the things I say is, when I'm talking to industry, and I talk about indigenizing your workforce, what does that mean? What does that look like? And what are those calls to action? Because the Yellowhead Institute came out with a report. They're the Indigenous watchdog. And when you look at the calls to action, I think only one was implemented in 2022, 0 in 23. To date, we're looking at 13 calls to action implemented of the 94, which means we're looking at 2081. If you follow that trajectory and that pattern with what's happening across, you know, the landscape with respect to government and industry, and even in our own communities. Because I'm talking to my chief, we received a settlement of $205 million. That's coming yet. So I sit on the board of ECDEV, and he'd asked me, what would you like to see happen with these dollars? I said, we need to adapt some of those green technologies. We need to harness that natural energy that sits below the surface and above the surface of our planet. We just have to get better at it. We already have the solutions. And as Indigenous people, we've been part of this landscape for so long, and we've been wanting to share our wise practices. And you know, I've had the good fortune of working with Eco Canada for the last couple of years just in and out and offering some eco-friendly solutions that have existed in our communities for thousands of years. And now we're welcoming people to our territories to come and engage, because we're shifting the dynamics of the politics in this country. We're moving capital, we're gaining momentum, we're becoming more prosperous than we ever have before. You know, we're the fastest growing businesses in this country. You're looking at 50 billion to date and 100 billion by the end of the decade. So there's a lot to say about the statistics and the movements that are taking place, all the partnerships, and it's beautiful to see. And I want to continue to, you know, empower that amongst everyone sitting here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Olivier. Maybe elaborate a little bit on the sort of the skill sets that you need at WSP at the moment, and perhaps why some of the expectations and the requirements for staff have changed over the years.
Well, yes, they have been changed. I think, you know, the skill sets is obviously someone who wants to play a role. And the attitude is key here, right? And I think, you know, working alongside with university and the academia is key for us. If we want to bring this expertise to our client that they are facing, as I mentioned, the most challenging project right now, it is working alongside with the academia. And this is something that we really value on our side, is to do some, you know, agreement and some partnership with the university to make sure that we leverage the expertise and really learn from others. I keep mentioning that how important it is to share the innovation. If we want to achieve what we want to achieve, we need to share the innovation. That's the key, right? And how often sometimes we break and then we have the tendencies to go in silos and think about a company, we are a company, and not working closely with the academia. We try to do so much with METACs and bringing some student within a new share knowledge that they bring to within WSP. That's key. That's definitely a key. And the other aspect is trying to also working closely with the First Nation. You mentioned right from the beginning how important it is to learn from the past. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we have a desire to do more and more on our side, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Amberly, how do you envision the future of the environmental workforce within the oil and gas industry? There's a lot that can be done there. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I often get the question, how can you be an environmental professional and work in the oil and gas industry? Like, clearly that does not go together very well. And I think one of the things that we have to recognize, and Olivier mentioned it, is that we need to have a bit more openness in mind, and we need to share. One of the really cool things about working in the oil and gas sector right now is all of the innovation that's happening. It's not happening, it is happening through universities and it's happening through academia, but it's also happening within the workforce. And we need to work collaboratively to share that information. And we need to bring in all of those diverse perspectives. We need to take in information about, you know, traditional knowledge on the land and information that's going to help us. We're facing a severe drought here in Alberta, and there's information that we've got available to us that we should be leveraging to help plan for that and prepare for that. And so I think for me, the oil and gas sector, we're not intending to go anywhere anytime soon, but we are intending to evolve the way we appear, and not just the way we appear, but the way we produce the responsible oil that we need for Canada and for the world, and doing so in a way that's environmentally responsible and takes into consideration innovation, and leverages all of that knowledge base that we have through our staff, through workforce, through our environmental professionals internally and externally, through the academia, and through the connections that we have with the Indigenous communities in which we're operating. And I think that's the key piece of it, is it's working collaboratively and bringing all of those different pieces and somewhat disparate perspectives sometimes to the table. And clearly, you know, to wrap it up, as an environment professional in the oil and gas industry, I've often said, you know, the best way to work something is to get inside of it and push out the boundaries a little bit. And there's lots of my peers that are doing that within the oil and gas sector. We're pushing the boundaries and we're trying to move us forward in a way that's positive and beneficial.
Following along on one of the themes here about traditional knowledge, Winona, what are some effective ways that we can bring some of that wisdom out of the community for the benefit of all? Are there ways we can do that in your mind?
Yes, there is. And I guess that's the positive. But at the same time, we need to, you know, protect that knowledge that's there. So the focus is heavily on conservation, preservation, and management of our lands. And we won't ever, we won't ever jeopardize that, because sometimes, that's all we have. And that Indigenous science, and I look at everyone in the room, we're all enthusiastic about the environment and the things that we've seen over time and things we're going to see going forward. You're all scientists. We're all scientists. Anybody that's done any work on the land, because we have to do our diligence as stewards globally. And what we're seeing is, when I walk into a community in Alberta and I'm talking to elders, I gravitate to them because I know they have walked this earth very delicately and very strategically with the air, earth, fire, water in mind. That's all part of those 7 natural laws and grandfather teachings that we've been born and ingrained with. And that knowledge is very, very sacred, and we have to treat it as such. So when we're engaging in having those conversations, there's a lot of sensitive material that does come up, as you know. When archaeologists discover, bones, or they discover, with residential school and all the findings, it's heartbreaking. But I see hope in all of that. And we're willing to share. We want to be part of these discussions, and we want to be part of those solutions. And think about Indigenous people in your plans going forward, because we do have a lot of knowledge. Even myself personally, I do plant walks for tourists that come from other countries because they want to engage and experience what it's like to be living somewhat close to Indigenous territories. You drive, when you go to Banff, you drive through Stoney every day, right? So, and I still get asked if you need a permit to go and visit our community. And this is 2024. And so I want to say that even for myself personally, I'm always willing to share, but it has to be reciprocal. I don't have to say that what's in it for me. I'm saying what's in it for the land, because that's where I want to see the benefits going forward, and taking care of the land that's been taking care of us for so long. And with that, I just want to say miigwech for having me and just being in this room with all of you wonderful people. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Olivier, much has been said about sort of transitioning the workforce to more sustainable and renewable sources of energy. What are some of the challenges you see with this, and do we have the right workforce to achieve it?
That's a good question, and especially here in Alberta. I'd like to discuss about this. I think you're totally right. Everybody is looking at different ways to do energy, and the needs in Canada for the energy is massive. We're not going to shift ourselves outside of oil and gas like that. Yeah, I was in COP28 actually personally, and for the first time, you're right, it was mentioned, but it's a transition. And how often, today I reflect on myself, for those I've been in the environment for more than 20 years. 20 years ago, an environmental consultant was brought because there was a problem. Now, C-suite level CEOs of mining company, oil and gas company, wants to see an expert in biodiversity and discuss about this. That's the shift that's happening really quickly. And I think this is really beneficial for our industry as an environmental consultant to see that shift happening, where, in the past you do this because you need to do it. But now you're trying to see yourself and project yourself in the future. This is exactly the shift happening right now, and it's really positive on my side.
fantastic. Leslie, I know I'm biased when I'm saying this, but as a representative from probably the best university when it comes to supporting environmental professionals and getting an upgrade to the next higher degree while working full-time, how are you guys keeping up with all the changes happening? You know, academia is not always driving forward, are they? Are you keeping up?
Sadly, they have not been driving the changes, but they must. And we must do the research that will be the basis for driving those changes. Kevin, I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership. We really desperately need new skills in the environmental sector, and Winona's talked about some of those skills. We need intercultural sensitivity. We need to trust and respect different knowledge systems. We need negotiation skills, courage, vision, quite right, Olivier, we definitely need vision. And how can we teach those things in a university? I think the only way we can teach them is to teach our students in the real world. And so our partnership with Eco-Canada has several different programs. One is a Master of Environmental Practice and a Bachelor in Environmental Practice, and that's emphasis on the practice. And then a few years ago, we started the Science and Policy of Climate Change. And most recently, the program I'm so excited about, which is the Indigenous Environmental Leadership Pathways Program, to do exactly what you want us to do, and to help prepare environmental leaders in Indigenous communities. And all of these programs have practica. And so for every student in these programs, they do a practicum in industry, in government, in Indigenous governments. And so for every student in these programs, we have a partnership with industry and other institutions in the society. And I think this is the only way to go. All of our students, almost all of our students are working. They're already environmental professionals. And so they also bring their experience from the real world into the university. And this is a desperate need. And I was just talking to Maureen Reed. She has a transdisciplinary living lab. And this is exactly what we need. We used to pride ourselves in environmental studies in being interdisciplinary. Now we need to be transdisciplinary. We need to work outside the university. We need to reach out outside the university. We need to deal with different knowledge systems. And we need to respect the wisdom of people who know much more about their environment because they've lived on it for centuries than we do. Whoops, sorry. Sorry, I'll get passionate. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. Winona, can you share some examples of successful collaborations that have empowered environmental innovation while respecting Indigenous values and practices? And what insights do you think can be shared with a global audience?
Well, I think with one of the youngest growing populations in the country, I saw an opportunity, and more so the potential in our communities, to bring that knowledge into the institution. So what IRC's done is we've partnered up with Yellowhead Tribal College, and we've offered the first cohort is running currently in Edmonton. We've got a cohort of 20 students from 13 different First Nations across Alberta in the Environmental Monitoring and Drone Technician Certificate Program. It's a one-year tuition-free university transfer program. And what I like about the drone technology is they're going to be able to go out there and conduct phase 1 and 2 environmental assessments on the land. They're already talking with emergency preparedness companies about forestry management and utilizing that technology. And one of the things we've talked about with a lot of the industry partners that have come on board, like Cocal Environmental, West Earth, which is amazing. And AER has even talked about doing joint inspections with our students, and that hasn't happened before. So we signed an MOU with the AER last fall, and we're working diligently to be out there on the land, because those elders know the land much more than we do, anybody in this room. So we need to invite and welcome that knowledge into our systems to create that, systematic resilience. And so with the drone technology, they're using it to spray lands in the south. So we're going to be hosting a drone program with the Red Crow Community College on the Blood Tribe as well. And then we're going to start up a cohort at SAIT. So we have an MOU with SAIT as well. So we're going to be starting up the 1 year more so for the southern folks like the Piikani, Siksika, the Kainai, and the Stoney Nations. So we want to open those doors a little wider, because we're looking at 250,000 monitors by the end of the decade. And that's mining, oil and gas, forestry, regulators, NGOs, private sector, so there's a lot of work. With the Trans Mountain, they're going to open those valves soon. We're going to need monitors, and we can't supply them quick enough. And Tribal Chiefs is hosted a training program as well at Blue Quill. So if any of you are looking for employees, junior technicians, our door's open. We're willing to engage and talk. The other project I want to talk just briefly about is Project Forest. I sit on the board, just recent appointment, and what we're focusing is on rewilding our forests with the trees and the shrubs and the berries. Because through development, through industrialization, we've seen a lot of deforestation and decarbonization. So now we want to restore and regenerate the land, and this is how we're going to do it. And so we're building a shelter belt in Siksika. We're going to start sometime this summer with 1.1 million trees. We're working Swan River First Nation. We're discussing with other nations across Western Canada and take these sustainable practices and principles, put them into action, because we're not replanting and reforesting fast enough. And we're taking our knowledge globally now. I just came back from Rwanda, working on a reforestation project in East Africa. So we're proud of our efforts. We're proud of the people that are standing up now for our mother, because we have to. It's time. It's overdue. So with that, I just say thank you.
All right, thank you. Olivier, in what ways can organizations collaborate with stakeholders to ensure that workforce initiatives are integrated into Canada's overall strategy for environmental conservation and sustainable development?
Well, it's a partnership approach, right? I think we need to sit down together and then exchange ideas and how it's feasible, and how often, a company that asks ourselves to act as a consultant, or they have a view, but they are not ready. I think the best thing is to assess their maturity level, where they want to go and how they want to go. And how often, in the change and what happened, with the disclosure in terms of greenhouse gas emission and things like that, there's lots of greenwashing right now. Lots of greenwashing. And I think people realize now how important it is to set targets that they are achievable. A couple of years ago, lots of those targets was set by marketing communication team within the big companies because it was sexy. Now they realize when the data is getting back, they're not going to be able to achieve their target because they didn't invest too much in the innovation. They didn't realize that the target that they set, it was not achievable. Lots of big companies have been going back to the market and say, you know what, I'm not going to achieve it. 30% of their stock goes down. So I think now more than ever, what I'm trying to say is to push the expertise, the experts, the technical ability. It's not sexy, right? It is something that is really important to set targets they are achievable. And how? It's science-based. The science is so much important. That's the reason why we're trying to really, really promote the technical ability that we have to work alongside with our client. This is a key aspect to set targets now.
Thank you very much. Leslie, as a director of a program in academia, what do you really see the role and also the responsibility of academia in kind of shaping the future of the environmental workforce?
Yeah, I think we have a huge responsibility. Royal Roads is one of 7 changemaker campuses in Canada. There's another 7 or so in the United States. And those are universities who have incorporated innovation and change into their operation, into all their programs. And I think every university has a responsibility to lead the change. And you're right, Kevin, many universities do not do that. Many universities are lagging behind, just like many governments in the international sector and here in Canada. We're lagging way behind. We're nowhere near where we need to be. As you said, we passed 1.5. When I started teaching about climate change back in the dark ages, we were just under 350 ppm, and now we're at 421 point something. And we were slipping back all the time. And so somebody has to grab the leadership role. And I think universities are well placed to do that, but only in partnership with other people, in partnership with Eco-Canada, in partnership with industry, in partnership with First Nations, in partnership with all Indigenous communities. But somebody has to take the leadership here, and because we're not doing what we need to do.
No, thank you very much. Amberley, how can organizations bridge the gap between traditional workforce structures and the evolving demands of sustainability? And how are you guys doing that?
Well, a big piece of it comes through innovation. Olivier mentioned, you can't set targets that you can't meet. It doesn't work well. And one of the key pieces is that you need to set a target that is ambitious enough to drive the change that you're looking to advance, but also is at least foreseeably achievable through application of innovation technologies and frankly, financial investment. And so one of the big things is looking at those innovation opportunities and finding new ways to do things, old ways to do things that are new again, however you want to look at it, but thinking outside of the traditional box. I wouldn't have suggested 5 years ago that I could see the major oil sands companies getting together and working together. Like, I would have been like, no way, that's never happening. And now the CEOs meet every Friday. Like, every single Friday they get together and they talk about what they're doing at the Pathways Alliance and how they're going to move forward. And a big piece of that is working with our academic partners in identifying innovations. We know we can do carbon capture and storage, but that's not what's going to solve all of the problems. So what are the other solutions out there? Is it small modular reactors? Is it electrification? Is it something we haven't even thought of yet, or maybe someone has thought of and we just haven't heard about it yet? So it's that opportunity to collaborate and take advantage of those innovations that we really need to put forward in order to advance the sector.
And a little plug for an AI session coming up that Lero will talk about. We'll address some of those things that will be quite interesting to see. Leslie, one final question for you here before we start wrapping up is what steps are being taken to ensure that educational initiatives are aligned with the broader national environmental goals and international commitments? Do you work backwards from some of those goals, or?
No, and I don't like the word alignment, because we need to exceed those goals by quite a bit to get where we need to go. So no, we are not trying to align with either national or international. These agreements and commitments are sort of the lowest common denominator, and that's why we need leadership in the university sector. We have to get out in front of this, and the only way we can do that is, you're quite right, the theme of this session, unity. We need to do it together. But we need to put aside the profit motive, the short-term thinking, and by golly, boy, this keeps me awake at night, because the state of biodiversity and what's happening with climate change are really frightening. And so we've got to stop the drop in the bucket mentality. We have to really move forward quite quickly. As you say, we're already past 1.5. And we need to bring it, we're not feeling this nearly as much as the small island states whose land is being washed away. And so, sorry, not aligning.
Well, thank you for that. Each of the panelists are now going to answer sort of a broader question, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So get ready and then sort of signal to whoever has the microphone if you have any questions for them. So this can go in whatever direction you guys want, and I'll start with Amberly and just move to my right. In creating a competent environmental workforce, what do you see as the greatest challenges and the greatest opportunities, and what should we do?
I think one of the greatest challenges is having the workforce ready when it's needed. We're talking about, major projects. The Pathways project has a major trunk line and hub for carbon sequestration. It's hundreds of thousands of jobs that we're going to need as a country to transition. And some of them are existing jobs, and some of them are repurposed jobs, and some of them are entirely new jobs we never thought of before. I mean, drone technology to do field inspections for phase 1 and 2, I don't need my rubber boots anymore. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of changes that are happening, and in order to fulfill those, the challenge will just be being ahead of the curve far enough that we've got the folks in place that we need when we need them to be cutting edge and lead the charge. The positive side of that, well, this conference is a great example of where people are already thinking about it. We're already taking those steps. Clearly, we've heard, from academia that things are moving forward. We need to be ahead. And so, folks are starting to think that way, and definitely we need to just continue that trend of being prepared and thinking maybe 5 or 6 steps ahead of where we are now, and aiming high.
Olivier?
Well, I'll use 2 angles, and I'm usually a positive person. If nothing has been done since the Paris Agreement, we would aim around 4 to 6 degrees. Now, I think we need to realize that the thing that has been put in place since Paris Agreement will allow ourselves to be potentially between 2.4 and 2.8 degrees, which is quite an achievement. We need to realize that. So that means that innovation, the workforce has been working together towards the same goal. But also, Canada will continue to change. A lot of people say that Canada will be a 100 million population country by the end of century. So that means it will bring a lot of challenges. But that also brings, you mentioned thinking outside of the box or traditional box a little bit. Now we're trying to include what I call inclusive in design in our project. Inclusive in design means that if there is an highway needs to be built around an area in a city that we know that there's a lot of single mom live in, we trying to include a noise and a vibration mitigation to make sure that they're not as to woke up during the night. Those are the kind of the thing that never happened 2 years ago. Inclusive in design is new in our vocabulary. That's those kind of things that will continue to happen, and I think we need to showcasing those progress that has been made. That's my point.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, I think complacency is one of our biggest challenges. We talk about what we need to sustain our way of life and our standard of living. I don't think our way of life and standard of living are very good, to tell you the truth. Every day I go by the homeless encampments in Victoria, and so as a result, I think we have to find really new ways. And one of the best ways of doing this is to treat the earth and the land and each other in a different way. We do not have a way of life that I think is sustainable. And we need to work that out, or we're never going to achieve what we need to achieve.
Oh, thank you. Winona?
Yeah, and I want to extend on that, to reconcile with our Mother Earth before we reconcile with each other, and always have that at the forefront of our mind, body, and spirits as Indigenous people. That's what we've always said, and we'll live by that right till our last breath. And so 2 challenges I think of are, of course, the systematic roadblocks. We're trying to push a geothermal project up in northern BC, and we had to push it back another year because we still don't have the permit. So that's a roadblock for us. We're ready to go. We've got the equity, we've got the people, right? We have all the resources required, including the technology, to get it going. But this permit is still waiting to get. And I think the other one is the chronic underfunding. It's going to require trillions of dollars of resources to digress and transition. We're still going to require oil and gas, right? But there are different ways to extract those resources. Because I don't know that even going solar, because you still have to extract lithium for these panels. So we're still struggling as nations to look at what those solutions truly are. And sometimes it's just going back to the simplicities of life and just honoring that. And I think we're bringing a lot of that knowledge forward now and building that, those protocols and those perspectives into those models, and it's doing wonders. On the positive side, I would say just, you know what? Our doors are open. And when we come into your workspaces, make us feel welcome. We're no stranger to each other. We all breathe the same air, right? And so we want to be allies. We need to unify, if not for our sake, for the planet's sake. So with that, I just say, hai miigwech masicho.
No, thank you. We're going to take some questions, but I was wondering if you could just give a 1-minute quick information about the Indian Resource Council, just in case someone not from around here or not familiar with what you do. And then maybe I'll see who wants to take questions.
So the Indian Resource Council is an advocacy group. It was formed in '87 by a number of chiefs across Canada, basically the watchdog for Indian Oil and Gas Canada. And so we work with a lot of the oil and gas producing nations across the West, predominantly. We do have a few in the East. We just recently, hosted a conference in Toronto to take that message to the East, to say this is what we're doing and how we're doing it, because there's a lot of misinformation about what's happening in this province. So we want to set it straight, and we have to tell it from our lens and tell that story. So right now our CEO is in a well position to go after phase 2 funding to continue cleaning up these wells in our communities, because our land bases are not growing, our populations are. And we want room to be able to repurpose some of this infrastructure or build new homes for our growing families. So at IRC, we do a lot to advocate. We help build equity, capital. We have access. We tell people we can help with business startups. So I focus a lot of time on business development, because when the SRP was in and around through COVID, we trained over 400 folks in preparation for the abandonment of these wells. And we're looking at 250,000 yet. So we haven't even scratched the surface with the amount of work that needs to get done. My children's children will be on this, reclaiming these sites for as long as oil and gas is coming out of the ground. So yeah, our focus though is on energy, but we're slowly shifting and diverting into the newer sectors. We're doing a roadshow this year with all 42 nations to talk about all the clean and green technology so that they can make informed decisions going forward and develop climate solutions as well, because we also have been on board and want to continue to do that and work in partnership with all our allies sitting in this room.
Thank you very
Kevin,
much.
can I say something?
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to build on your funding issue, because I think the one hopeful sign coming out of COP28 was the reform of the global financial system and redirecting financial flows to where they're really needed to get out to fulfill our commitments. And part of that are these incredibly worthy projects that struggle for funding. And, it was just a murmur. It was just a glimpse. The world financial system has not been renovated since World War II, when we got the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, but we do need to redirect those financial flows.
Questions from the audience? Right here.
Thank you. So my name is Peter Polanowski. I'm from SLR Consulting. First off, I want to thank you for today's kickoff. It was an exciting discussion. I guess one quick comment and then a question. So Winona, just kind of building off what you were saying. I work, I'm a senior ESG consultant for SLR. I guess I'm part of what I would call Sustainability Inc. There's a lot of people in my field who call themselves sustainability experts. In my mind, there's very, very few experts in sustainability. First, that our discipline has become extremely broad. There's so many subdisciplines. Secondly, in terms of practicing true, deep sustainability, it's really Indigenous people all over the world. It's the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis of Turtle Island, of what is now called Canada, that are true sustainability leaders. And, I think in order to, live within planetary boundaries going forward as a nation, as a society, we increasingly need to look to and to learn from Indigenous people all over the world, and that traditional knowledge is vital. So thank you. A question for I guess all of you. So in terms of the Pathways Alliance, one of the value propositions for our oil and gas resources here is the fact that we have really high ESG performance, which I think largely is true, in terms of environmental standards and regulations, social performance and governance structures. We are strong performers. And I think nations all over the world want to compete for the last barrel of oil. But what if, the economics just don't make sense? If oil demand drops faster than we expect, what is the contingency plan? What is the plan B if that sort of value proposition of, strong ESG performance, doesn't really play out?
I'll give it a whirl, and then you tell me if I missed the mark. So I think you mentioned a couple things. So the value proposition of decarbonization, to be frank, there's not a lot of value in it. It's a social aspect, but it's not a fiscal, it doesn't make money. And there's no competitive advantage currently in global markets to having a greener oil barrel or a decarbonized barrel. Now, there's definitely benefits and there's recognition, and clearly the Pathways Alliance wouldn't exist if the oil sands players didn't see a benefit to having a stronger ESG performance and to decarbonizing the barrel. And frankly, the benefit is to be the last barrel standing, to continue to produce the natural resource we have in Canada for the benefit of Canadians and for energy security, both domestically and globally. Now, if that went away, if the demand declined, then there would be no market. And if there's no market, there's no need for the product. And so I think just like any market-based economy, if your demand declines in some drastic form, then you no longer prepare the product, you don't produce. Now, I will start off with, I don't have any knowledge of any credible long-term forecasts that don't show continued oil use through at least 2050. So that's where the value proposition for us in investing in decarbonization comes in, because we see a continued demand, but recognize the need to produce that in a responsible manner. And that's where you're looking at investing in carbon capture or other technologies in order to continue to fill that demand that we see into the future. Because I'm an engineer, normally I'd have a little graph that shows all that, but trust me, there's a graph. Okay.
That was good. That was a good answer. Thank you.
Question up front here.
Hello, my name is Bernardes, and I have a question for Amberly regarding the Pathway Alliance. Does the Pathway Alliance have any plans of expanding outside of the oil sands, sharing the technology that you guys are discovering, and to reduce the emissions overall, making a greener barrel, not only in Canada, but perhaps internationally as well?
For sure. So the first step was getting oil sands companies to collaborate, and now we've got that going. We've actually built on what was previously the Canadian Oil Sands Innovation Alliance. So that was the 10 oil sands companies in Canada about a decade or so ago had started and gotten together and recognized the need to share environmental performance technologies and ways to improve their environmental performance. Building on that collaborative approach, Pathways Alliance has been established, and one of our intents is to, as we commercialize or develop new technologies, we're doing a lot of it in collaboration with academia, and so a lot of those technologies will become something that we as an organization and the professors and the master students that are developing them will be able to export. Canada has an opportunity actually to export innovation and technologies that we're developing here at home for use in other countries or in other parts of the country. I mean, I'm a little Alberta-centric, but we have that opportunity to expand some of those. And it was mentioned, things like geothermal and can we, make new innovations in solar panels or whatever it might be. I think one of the real benefits as a collective is that we can develop these technologies and share them, and it will require that collaboration. If everybody develops a new technology and is like, ha 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 ha, then we won't ever have that systemic change that we need across the country and more broadly. So yes, absolutely, that is one of the tenets of sharing through the Pathways Alliance, and then sharing those communications, technologies, innovations, new ways of thinking out more broadly to the oil and gas sector and to other sectors that frankly can leverage the same technologies. And likewise, looking to work with our colleagues in cement and reforestation and nature-based solutions to help bring those new innovations into and apply them in the oil sands sector as well. So in and out, I think.
One final question. Back here.
Hi there. My name is Eric Lowe. I'm a student for the Master's in Environmental Practices from Railroads. My question is, what changes are we actually making at an international level to allow for sustainability to move forward and to make it as a global presence?
So I can give an example. So we're currently working with a global company out of northern China. It's called Wisdom Water. They've come up with technology 20 years ago that turned sludge into drinking water. So we approached a couple nations to gauge their level of interest. So we're working with Wisdom Water to adopt this technology because what we also want to do in extension of bringing clean water to our communities, because I'm a huge advocate of the water, and looking at how we can clean up our rivers and waterways with this technology. And they have 16 international patents, so even if someone here came up with similar technology, they wouldn't be able to get that approved. So nations are looking to global companies now to adopt this technology, and that's innovative. So they're going to be building a facility in Leduc in the coming months. And we're talking about training already, right? So I think we have to look outside and work beyond our borders and partner with our Indigenous allies around the world to share these technologies. I think that's one very viable, hopeful solution that we're going to quickly adopt, and they've chosen First Nations to work with when they could have easily partnered with another corporate partner in Canada. But they see the need in our communities, and you don't have to go far to see third world conditions in this country. So that's one of the things that I'm priding myself on, and making sure that my children can take these messages forward to a time that I'm not going to see. But hopefully, by collaborating and building allies with our other Indigenous partners, because we're all relatives, we all, and if people had a greater understanding of that connection to the land, I think you would get it. But we're not there yet. We're at that crossroads though, right? We're starting to look at how to blend, how to braid that Western and Indigenous science. So I hope that helps a little bit to put perspective into some of those sustainable solutions, because where we're going is not sustainable at the moment.
Can I build up on that? WSP is a global company, obviously, right? So knowledge sharing is important. Going back to your question related to global, what happened in the Vancouver or BC region with the flood like 4 years ago approximately, it happened in New Zealand last year. So our team from BC actually really shared the knowledge that what happened in BC to really help our New Zealand colleagues to work with the Department of Transportation in New Zealand to learn what happened and how actually resilient we rebuilt the infrastructure in BC to be resilient more and more in New Zealand. And I was in New Zealand in December, and I saw the work that has been done in transfer from BC to New Zealand. That was amazing to me, how that the knowledge sharing is important here.
No, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions. We have a packed schedule today, but please join me in thanking the panelists for doing a tremendous job.